The novel revolves around Raven, a young woman entangled in a complex web of love, loyalty, and an impending war, all set against the backdrop of a supernatural world. Having survived a harrowing 3-month captivity, Raven returns to find solace and strength in the arms of Theo, one of her werewolf mates. However, the respite is fleeting as she faces the daunting task of choosing between her beloved mates, knowing that her decision holds the key to their survival and her own emotional well-being. The narrative delves into Raven's internal struggle, haunted by the memory of her captor, Milos Santorini, who possesses charms linked to her mates' lives, threatening their very existence. This looming threat underscores the urgency of her choices, while also revealing her deep-seated fear of losing any of them, having experienced life without them during her imprisonment. As the story progresses, Raven's world is further complicated by the emergence of a prophecy that forecasts a war and her pivotal role in ending it. She learns that the only location where she can defeat the enemy, known as the Triangle, is Nocturne Island, a place that mysteriously amplifies her powers but also makes her ill. This knowledge adds another layer of challenge and foreboding to her journey. Amidst the turmoil, Raven's relationships with her mates are tested, particularly with Cain, whose history of violence and love lost raises doubts about his intentions. Their passionate encounters, however, reveal a depth of emotion that complicates her feelings and decisions further. The novel explores themes of sacrifice, trust, and the consequences of choice. Raven grapples with the responsibility of her destiny, the weight of prophecy, and the delicate balance between her personal desires and the greater good. With the threat of war looming, the characters must navigate their roles in a conflict that will reshape their world. As the story unfolds, secrets are revealed, alliances are tested, and the line between enemies and allies blurs. Raven's journey becomes a race against time to understand the ancient curses tied to her lineage, confront her fears, and make choices that could either save or damn those she loves. Ultimately, it's a tale of self-discovery, love's enduring power, and the lengths one will go to protect those they cherish. Chapter 1. The sun streamed in through my window, casting its warm golden glow over the bed and right into my face. Old me used to get annoyed when I was woken up by the sun streaming into my face, but new me was just thankful to see sunlight. I had spent a long 3 months without seeing the light of day at all. As my phone alarm started to go off, Theo groaned loudly against my ear. Loosening his hold on me, he stretched, untangling himself from me. Ever since I had returned, he slept with his arms in a tight embrace around me. It was clear that he wasn't about to let me go, and honestly, I didn't want him to. "Good morning," he whispered, lowering his mouth to mine. I kissed him back, allowing my lips to linger on his. "Good morning." I ran a hand through his short black hair. His 5 o'clock shadow was more prominent than usual. His ocean blue eyes stared into mine for a long moment before he finally sighed. "I really don't want to leave this bed, or you." "Then don't," I replied. "I'll stay here with you all day." As nice as that sounds, we both know we can't do that. It's the first day of school. He kissed me one more time before rolling out of the bed. As he began to pull his clothes on, I kicked the satin comforter off of me and climbed out of bed too. I eyed my closet, deciding on the same black dress I had worn last year. The only difference this year was that I didn't even want to go to school. Nope, I hadn't been kidding about wanting to just stay in bed all day. But I still pulled the dress on anyway. Then I headed over to the vanity, where I applied mascara and some lip gloss in a completely half-assed attempt at trying to make it look like I had my shit together. In reality, I didn't have my shit together. Not even the slightest bit together. "So, have you given it any thought yet?" Theo asked me. He didn't have to explain for me to know what he meant by it. He was talking about the decision I still had yet to make. Which of my mates was I going to choose? Ever since I had managed to escape from Milos's dungeon, all of my mates had been pushing me to make a decision. I understood their reasoning. I had spent 3 long months without them. Made all of us realize just how precious our time together was. I didn't want to spend another minute without them again. But even though all of my mates wanted me to make a decision sooner rather than later, Theo was by far the pushiest. He wanted me to choose once and for all who I wanted to be with for the rest of my life. He wanted me to decide which of the Darkin I wanted to marry. I still wore the engagement ring the pack had gotten me, with the promise that I would choose one of them to spend the rest of my life with once I was ready. The problem was that I wasn't ready. Not yet. And I hated that I wasn't ready. Because every part of me wanted to make a decision too. But there were just Too many new factors that complicated things. Factors like him. I completely got why Theo wanted me to choose so badly. But what he didn't realize was that the more he pushed me to choose, the more I wanted to do exactly the opposite. I just wanted to bury my head in the sand and pretend that the problem didn't exist. No, I honestly haven't even had time to think about it, I replied with a shrug, trying to play it off coolly as I glanced across the room at him. Theo nodded, but I could see the disappointment behind his light blue eyes. He wanted me to pick. And he didn't want me to pick just anyone. He wanted to be the one who I chose to spend forever with. If only it was that easy. Once Theo and I were both dressed, we headed down to the kitchen to join the rest of my mates, who were already having breakfast. So you guys, I've been giving it some thought and I don't think I'm going to school, I announced as I entered the room. I wasn't sure why I had even bothered getting ready today. This feeling wasn't a new one. For days I had thought about skipping school. Now that it was almost time to leave, the urge to just stay home was even stronger than it had been before. A pin-dropping silence filled the room as Colton stopped pouring his cereal. Aidan stopped chugging orange juice straight from the carton, and Reese nearly spilled the cup of coffee he was carrying across the room. Theo, who had just entered the kitchen behind me, froze in his tracks. What? Do you mean you're not going to school? You can't play hooky today. It's the first day. Actually, what I meant is that I don't think I should go to school at all this year. You mean you want to drop out? Reese ruffled his auburn hair as he stared up at me from behind his dark blue eyes, which had gone really wide. Well, no, but I was thinking that maybe I can just defer a year, I explained, as I slid into a chair at the kitchen table. Aidan's honey brown eyes, which stood out against his deeply tanned skin, locked on mine. Werewolf Academy doesn't work that way, Raven. You can't just defer a year. You get one chance only, and that's it. Werewolf Academy has a long waiting list. If you don't show up, they'll just give your spot to someone who will. Well, then I guess someone else can have my spot. I shrug. No, absolutely not. Theo shook his head. You're going to school. As settled. I glanced over at him sharply. Well, aren't you bossy? You seem to forget that you're not the alpha of this pack. As soon as the words slipped out of my mouth, I instantly wished I could take them back. I knew that Theo hated that he wasn't alpha anymore. The worst part of it all was that I wasn't even alpha of the darkened pack either. Not anymore. This summer everything had changed, for the worse. Theo's bright blue eyes met mine apologetically, and his tone softened as he said, I'm sorry, Raven. I really wasn't trying to be bossy or alpha-like, but your education is more important than you realize. You still have 2 more years of learning left to do. As tempting as it may seem right now, you can't just drop out. I knew he wasn't wrong, but that didn't change the fact that I really wasn't looking forward to this. I'm just not ready to go back yet. Theo shot a sad look in my direction. I know, but one of us will be there with you most of the time. But not all of the time, I whispered. And the truth was that I needed one of them to be around me always. After everything that had happened this past summer, I needed them more than anything else in the world. My mind kept drifting back to the fact that Milos had a bracelet with 4 charms. One that was directly connected to each of my mates' hearts. At any moment, Milos could crush any or all of those charms, and ultimately end their lives. And living without them for 3 months had shown me that I didn't want to have to live without any of them, ever. Chapter 2. When my mates and I arrived on campus, I fled from the car trying to dodge the raindrops that pelted down against me like bullets. A shiver cascaded down my spine at the thought. War was coming, and I would be at the forefront of it all. That much was certain. The only question was when. None of us knew the answer to that. Was one of the unknowns that was currently plaguing me, plaguing all of us. The only thing I did know was that I was ready. Ready to fight, ready to kill, ready to get my revenge once and for all. Spending 3 months locked in your enemy's dungeon will do that to you. The absolute last thing I wanted was to spend my time sitting in a classroom. After I had just spent 3 months locked in a dungeon. A lump formed in my throat as I tried to push the memory of the dungeon to the depths of my mind. It had been one of the darkest points of my life, something I didn't ever want to revisit again. And yet, as much as I didn't want to think about it, it kept rising to the surface like a volcanic eruption. Could never get Milos Santorini off my brain, and I fucking hated it. Normally, I saw a new school year as a new beginning. It had always symbolized hope, growth, and change. It was a fresh start. Usually I looked forward to seeing what it had in store for me. But this year, well, I was dreading the new school year too much to see any sort of hopefulness in it. I was definitely feeling like the glass was half empty. There had to be a light at the end of the tunnel, but right now, it just felt like the tunnel was going to be never ending. As I entered my homeroom classroom, I found an empty desk towards the back of the class. Setting my backpack down on the floor, I pulled my schedule out and went over it again. 8 a.m. Werewolf Mating and Marriage Rituals with Professor Theo Rossi. Descendants Room 201. 9 a.m. Advanced Weaponry with Professor Reese Anderson. Descendants. Room 212. 10 a.m. Werewolf Medicine with Kesha Washington. Descendants Room 202. 11 a.m. Lunch. 12 p.m. Deadly Lunar Magic with Caroline Wickburn. Crescents Room 203. 1 p.m. Lunar Magic 301 with Professor Mindy Lee. Descendants Room 201. 2 p.m. Advanced Paranormal History with Professor Aidan Flores. Descendants. Room 204. 3 p.m. The Laws of Dark Magic with Professor Colton James. Descendants Room 203. What really sucked was that all of these classes seemed so interesting. Things were different. I probably would have been all sorts of excited about everything I would learn this year. But I wasn't. It was hard to be excited about anything school-related after everything that had gone on this summer. And it was going to be nearly impossible to get my head in the game when it came to school when I already knew what the future would bring. I had a list of things I needed to do, like prepare for war and take down my enemies. The absolute last thing I needed was to be at Werewolf Academy, but here I was. I knew my pack members felt my education was important, but honestly, I didn't think werewolf marriage and mating rituals or advanced paranormal history would help me kill Milos Santorini. Raven. Hey girl, hey. I heard the familiar sound of Vince's voice say, snapping me out of my thoughts. Hi. I forced a weak smile. You didn't come to the full moon party last night. Yeah, sorry. I just wasn't in the mood. You weren't in the mood to see me? A look of sadness filled his eyes. I haven't heard from you all summer, Raven. That's a really long time to not contact your bestie. And I know it's not just me. Maddie said she hasn't heard from you either. We've both been worried sick about you. Is everything okay? There was a genuine tone of concern in his voice. I thought about telling him everything was okay so he wouldn't worry as much. But honestly, the truth was that everything wasn't okay, and I wasn't about to lie to him. I'm sorry. A lot has happened since the last time we spoke. That was an understatement, of course. My life would never be the same again. What's going on? His eyes met mine with a look of worry. Can we talk about it later? I knew I needed to tell Vince everything, but right now wasn't the time or place. We were surrounded by other students, and Theo was about to enter the classroom at any minute now. It's something I need to talk to you about in private. Of course, Vince replied as he slid into the desk in front of me. He turned to look at me. But are you okay? Before I could even think about how to answer him, I heard the familiar sound of shoes clacking against the floor as someone entered the room. A knot in my stomach tightened as her light blue eyes fell on mine. I felt like I was going to puke as she cast a wicked grin in my direction. Iris. And that was all it took. Just like that, my mind transported me back to Milos's dungeon. I let out a loud growl as I gnawed at the bars of the dungeon cell that I was being held captive in. I bit down so hard on the cold metal that I hurt my jaw. I wanted nothing more than to get the fuck out of here, but even my beastly strength wasn't enough to break down these bars. I realized that the bars must have been charmed so that they wouldn't break. At least Milos Santorini was good at charming something, because it sure as hell wasn't me. My wolf had completely taken over because I was pissed. Really, fucking pissed. And for damn good reason. 7 nights had passed since I'd gone missing from Werewolf Academy. That meant 7 nights had passed since I'd last seen my mates, and it was killing me. The withdrawals, the cravings, the hunger I felt for them was real. I was pretty sure I was going to lose my mind if I had to spend another night in Milos's dungeon without any form of social interaction. I hadn't seen him or Iris since I had first woken up here. A part of me secretly wondered if I had only been hallucinating when I'd seen her, but deep down I knew that it was real, very, very real. I still didn't want to believe that she was an enemy, but it was pretty obvious No friend would have been hanging out in my biggest rival's dungeon. What I still couldn't figure out was why. Why would she do this to me? Had she ever even been my friend at all? At that moment, I heard the sound of the door open and heels clicking against the cement dungeon floor. Instinctively, I growled. I heard the sound of Iris laughing then. Hello to you too, Raven. I saw her dark figure move through the shadows until she was standing in front of me. She pushed a tray of food underneath the bars. I leapt forward at her, trying to bite her hands through the bars, but she pulled away from me before I could do any damage. I can see you're angry, Raven, and I understand why. No one likes to be held against their will. It wasn't fair of Milos to lure you the way he did, but we had to get you here somehow. It wasn't like you would have just come here with us without a fight. She pointed her chin at my wolf form. I know what you're probably thinking. Why is Iris here? I grunted my agreement at her. I kept trying to change back into my human form so I could actually speak to her, but I was too angry. So angry that my body just remained stuck in my wolf form. She smiled at me. This isn't what it looks like, I'm sure. You probably think I'm romantically involved with Milos. The truth? I do love him. But I learned a long time ago that Milos only has eyes for you, so that's not the reason I'm here. Her eyes locked on mine then, and all I could feel was hatred. That was when I knew that she blamed me for the reason Milos didn't love her back. If only she knew that I wanted no part of him. He may have been the most powerful werewolf in the world, but that didn't mean anything. He didn't hold a candle to my mates. The love I felt for the Darkin was real. Nothing Milos Santorini could have done would have ever made me feel that way about him. The reason I'm here has everything to do with you. With your powers. Her light eyes locked on mine. The more cooperative you are with us, the sooner you'll get to leave. So what do you say? Will you do everything we ask of you? I let out a low growl. I wanted her to know that the answer was no. Fortunately, she got the message. I see that you have no intentions of cooperating with us, Iris commented. But that's okay. We have a way around it. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but Milos is known for his ability to compel other werewolves. We'll get you to do everything we want you to do, whether you like it or not. Her lips curved upwards into a wicked smile before she turned away from me and headed back up the dungeon stairs, leaving me alone and completely in the dark. Once she was gone, I let out a loud howl. I needed to get the fuck out of here. As Iris took a seat in front of Vince, my heart pounded against my chest like a sledgehammer. I knew I should have just skipped school this year. Why had I let my mates talk me into this? I wasn't ready to face her. I hadn't even expected her to show up, not after everything that had happened this summer. I really thought she would have stayed with Milos. The last thing I had expected was for her to show her face at Werewolf Academy again. But now that she was here, I knew I wasn't safe. I couldn't do this. Without even thinking twice about what I was doing, I bolted out of my desk and headed for the front of the room. I didn't look in her direction as I made a mad dash for the door of the classroom. As I slipped out into the hallway, I expected my heart rate to return to normal, but it didn't. I couldn't be around her. There was just no way I would be able to get through this semester. I was halfway down the hallway when I completely collided with Theo. Raven, are you okay? Your heart is pounding a mile a minute and you look like you've seen a ghost. I wished I had seen a ghost. This was far worse than that. She's here, I managed to say through my panicked breathing. Who's here? Theo asked at first. But then the color completely drained from his face and I knew he understood exactly who I was talking about. Iris is here, he whispered. I nodded, still trying to calm myself. Are you okay? Theo asked me. I just stared back at him, unsure of how to answer that question. Clearly I was okay physically, but mentally, that was a whole other story. Seeing Iris had made me realize one thing. My PTSD was worse than I had realized. When I didn't respond, Theo let out a deep sigh. I really didn't think she would have the balls to show her face here. Damn it. This wasn't supposed to happen. Is there a problem, Professor Rossi? Headmaster Black's familiar voice filled the air. Shit. If there was one more thing I didn't want to deal with today, it was the headmaster. I didn't like him. I didn't trust him. And frankly, I wanted no part of him. Actually, there is a problem, Headmaster. Can we speak with you in your office? Theo asked. Why, of course. Headmaster Black smiled at us as he began to lead the way down the hallway. There's nothing I want more than to wipe that smile right off his face. Theo spoke to me through mindspeak. I couldn't have agreed more. As we entered Headmaster Black's office, he motioned to the 2 chairs across from his desk. Please have a seat, Mr. Rossi and Miss Gallagher. I sat down and Theo slid into the chair beside me. Reaching over, he grabbed my hand and gave it a little squeeze. So, Mr. Rossi, what seems to be the problem? I want Raven to be removed from all of Iris's classes, Theo told him. Headmaster Black's eyes widened. That seems like an odd request. His gaze shifted to me. I thought Iris Frost was one of your close friends. She was one of my close friends, but not anymore. I paused, swallowing hard. It's important for me to be away from her. Really far away from her. And why is that, Miss Gallagher? The headmaster pressed. Because she tried to kill me. Headmaster Black leaned forward. Iris Frost tried to kill you? She didn't just try. She almost succeeded, Theo added. I'm sorry, but I find it very hard to believe that Iris Frost tried to kill you, the headmaster replied, shaking his head. Oh, do you know Iris on a personal level? Theo asked defensively. Well, no, I can't say that I do. In fact, I have had very few exchanges with Miss Frost. But we've never had any issues with her in the past. She has a clean academic record. In fact, she's one of our brightest students. So, just because she has a perfect record and she's a bright student doesn't mean she's not a murderer, I protested. My cheeks were growing hot with anger. But you're sitting right in front of me, Miss Gallagher. Therefore, Miss Frost isn't a murderer, Headmaster Black pointed out. Okay, but she helped Milo Santorini kidnap me. Milo Santorini kidnapped you? He kept me as a prisoner in his dungeon for 3 months this summer. It was one of the first times I'd actually said it out loud. Somehow that only made feel more real. The skepticism was obvious in the headmaster's black eyes. It was clear that he didn't believe that either. I'm sorry, Miss Gallagher. It's not that I don't believe your story, but if Milo Santorini kidnapped you and held you as his prisoner as you claim, I highly doubt you would have lived to tell the tale. And what does any of this have to do with Miss Frost? Iris is Milos's accomplice, I explained. She's another ancient. Iris is an ancient? The doubt was written all over his face. I knew that there was no convincing him of any of this. For reasons I didn't understand, the truth was unbelievable to him. Iris is a descendant, I replied pointedly. Just because she's a descendant doesn't mean she's an ancient, Headmaster Black replied. I sighed, knowing there was just no use. There was no convincing him of the truth. Look, believe what you want, but the truth is that I've had one hell of a bad summer, Headmaster Black. All I'm asking is that you switch me out of Iris's classes, please. He stared at me for a long moment. Then finally he turned to his computer. He stared at it long and hard for a few moments before sighing. I'm afraid that I cannot honor your request, Miss Gallagher. There are no spots in any other classes. Headmaster, please, can't you just switch another student schedule with hers? Theo asked. That's simply not possible, Mr. Rossi. Given that Miss Gallagher is both descendant and crescent, it would take a lot of rearranging to make it happen. And classes have already begun. I'm sorry. Now if you'll both excuse me, I need to get on with my day, and you both need to get to class now. The headmaster shot both of us a look that told us to get the hell out of his office. I made a beeline for the door. God damn it. Theo punched the stone wall once we turned a corner. I watched as the stone shattered. Elemient feeks, I murmured in the witch language. I watched as the stone repaired itself. Lunar magic was pretty useful sometimes. I'm fucking pissed. How can he make you take classes with her? She kidnapped you. The rage in Theo's voice was obvious. Maybe you should drop out. I shook my head. No. Raven, it's not safe for you to be near her. We can just train you privately, the way we have been during the summer months. I'm going to school, I replied quietly. I really do support you dropping out, Theo insisted. I didn't think it was a good idea at first, but now that she's here, well, I get why you wouldn't want to be here. And we can make it work. I can resign. He paused. In fact, we can all resign. Without you going to school here, there's no reason the rest of us have to teach here. We're only here because of you, but we can just Homeschool you. You'll get the same lessons just on a one-on-one basis and— Theo, stop, I interrupted, meeting his blue eyes under the dim hallway lighting. I'm still going to Werewolf Academy. My mate just stared back at me blankly. Why? Because dropping out is no longer an option. It would only mean letting her win. That's what they want, to scare me. I can't let them. I can't back down. She can't know I'm afraid of her. Even though I so was. Iris had shown me a side of herself over the summer that I didn't want to ever deal with again. I had no idea what she was capable of, and truthfully, didn't want to find out. I would never let her back into my life again, even if that meant that I had to cut off Vince too. Chapter 3. When Theo and I re-entered the classroom, I made a deliberate effort not to make eye contact with Iris. I wasn't about to back down or let her win, but that didn't mean I had to look at her. I didn't need to see her gloating. As Theo headed to the front of the room and I made my way to the back of the classroom, I could feel all eyes on us. Everyone must have thought that we were fooling around in his office or something. It made me miss the simplicity of last year. Life had been so much easier back when fooling around in Theo's office on the first day of school had been one of our biggest worries. Back before we had known that war would soon be upon us. Back when Iris had been my best friend and not my enemy. It was so crazy how much had changed in just a year. It made me wish that we could go back. But that would have meant going back to a completely different place and time, a place that no longer existed. Nothing was the same now. Not even me. When lunch came, I ordered my food and then scanned the cafeteria for someone I knew. Thankfully, Iris and Vince were nowhere to be found. I figured that she must have convinced him and his mate Julie to sit outside today, probably so she could feed both of them lies about me. As much as I didn't want to end up losing Vince, I had a feeling that it was inevitable at this point. Continuing to glance around the room, I spotted a wave of black hair at the back corner of the room along the windows. It was the first time I had seen Maddie on campus. She was sitting across from Brandon Mitchell, her mate who we had known back in the human world. Even from a distance I could see the way the two of them were staring into each other's eyes. They looked completely caught up in one another. It was as if there was no one else in the world, let alone the cafeteria, but them. It made me feel sort of bad that I was about to interrupt them, but they had spent the entire summer together back in Westbrook. I hadn't spoken to Maddie since before summer break had begun. She still didn't know anything about what had happened to me this summer, the kidnapping, the near murder, the fact that a war involving the Darken Pack, a war about me, was about to begin at any moment. I had thought about telling her, but some things are just better said face to face. As I sat down next to Maddie, she broke her gaze with Brandon for the first time. Hey Raven, my best friend chirped as Brandon said, hey. Before I could get a word in edgewise, Maddie continued, oh my god, I've been trying to get in touch with you all summer. I know reception can be bad in this realm sometimes, but I didn't know it was that bad. Actually, it didn't have anything to do with bad reception. I'm sorry. A lot has happened since the last time I saw you, I explained. Is everything okay? There was a look of concern in her brown eyes. It will be. At least I hoped it would be. Maybe I can catch you up to speed later. I glanced over at Brandon pointedly. Oh, shit. You want privacy? He rose to his feet. I'll go hang out with my friends. I'll catch you later, babe. He leaned down and kissed Maddie before heading towards the front of the cafeteria. She stared after him longingly as he went. I love him so much. This past summer, all I've done is fall for him. Remember when I thought I was in love with Robbie? Yeah. Robbie was Maddie's ex-boyfriend who had bitten her just so she couldn't escape him. He had hoped that she would turn out to be his mate, but fate didn't let that happen, thankfully. Instead, she was mated to Brandon, who we had known since we were kids. That doesn't even remotely compare to what Brandon and I have. She turned to me then. Anyway, what happened? Are you really okay? And so, I told her everything. About how Milos had lured me to his dungeon, how I had woken up to Iris while I was there, and everything else that had taken place there. When I had finished my story, Maddie just shook her head in anger. I can't believe this. I've never trusted Iris, you know that. But I didn't think she was capable of something like this. Yeah, it was a pretty big shock to me too. Maddie paused. Have you told Vince about what happened? I shook my head. No, I'm not sure if I'm going to either. Raven, why? Vince needs to know what a monster she is. And you know he'll take your side. It's not like he didn't see that Iris had gotten really weird, Maddie said. I know he'll take my side, and that's part of why I can't say anything. I don't understand, Maddie replied, shaking her head. You know the saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Well, the one thing that will piss Iris off even more is if I ruin the one and only friendship she has on this campus, I explained. I'm not sure if I'm ready to deal with the backlash from that right now. I just need to figure out a plan on how to handle everything first. I get it. I just don't think Iris deserves to have him as a friend. I'm more afraid that she might try to use him as a pawn in her game. I'll still be friends with both of them, Maddie suggested. That way I can keep an eye on Vince. But Iris knows that you're my best friend. She'll know that I told you, I insisted. And what's she going to do about it without letting the truth drop in front of Vince? Trust me, I've got this. It's all about playing the role. I decided this summer that it's my goal to become a famous actress. Brandon and I are going to Los Angeles next summer. He's going to a filmmaking camp and I'm going to an acting camp. That's awesome, I said. It is. I'm really excited. But this will be my first real acting job. Maddie made air quotes with her fingers. I'll give her the performance of my life. Well, thank you. It was relieving to know that someone would be watching out for Vince even if it couldn't be me. Don't thank me. It's just the right thing to do. I care about Vince too, you know. He's a really good friend. He is. And I was going to miss him like hell this year. Or at least until I figured out what to do about Iris. Brandon's having a party this Friday night, by the way. You know, to kick off the start of the school year, Maddie informed me. It wouldn't be the start of a school year without Brandon throwing a party. I replied with a laugh. Are you going to come? We're throwing it the same place he held it last year. Last year I had seen Milos for the first time ever in person at Brandon Mitchell's party. So much had happened since then in just 1 year. How did I know that Milos wouldn't return this year just because he could? Wouldn't have put it past him. I don't know, Maddie. The absolute last thing I want is to run into Iris. I replied with a sigh. I promise I'll kick her ass if she tries anything. Please. Maddie shot me. Pouty face. It just wouldn't be the same without you. I stared at her for a long moment before finally nodding. Fine. I'll be there. But if Iris tries anything, I don't want you going near her. You can't kick her ass. Fine. Maddie rolled her dark brown eyes. I hoped that she was hearing me, and that she wouldn't actually try anything. When it came down to it, Iris was a lot more powerful than my best friend knew. After lunch came Deadly Lunar Magic with Caroline Wickburn in the Crescent's house. It was also the first time that Vince and I had been in a class alone together. When I got to the classroom, I was sort of relieved to find that the seats had all filled up quickly. The only open desk was across the room from where Vince was sitting. That couldn't have worked out more perfectly. The further away I was from him, the less likely I would be to spill the beans on what had really happened between Iris and I this past summer. As Caroline Wickburn arrived to the classroom, I was surprised to find that she looked completely rejuvenated. Her naturally fair skin was glowing and she had cut her auburn hair into a short hairstyle and added blonde highlights which made her light eyes pop. She also looked happy, which seemed odd considering Javier Rodriguez, the half-ancient werewolf, half-vampire who she had been dating last year, was no longer teaching at Werewolf Academy this year. I wondered if they were still together or not. I wasn't sure if Caroline Wickburn knew it, but Javier and I were bloodmates. Our bloodmate bond had formed after he had compelled me to kiss him. A bloodmate was someone who a vampire was connected to for life, meaning Javier had to drink my blood every month for the rest of his life in order to live. The only way to get out of the bloodmate bond was if one of two things happen. 1. He wasn't able to drink my blood at least once a month, which would cause not just him but both of us to die. 2. We killed him some other way, which would allow me to continue living. Aidan felt that killing Javier should have been at the top of our to-do list. Even though I knew we did need to get rid of him at some point, I believed there were far more important things for us to do right now than kill him. The list of werewolves we needed to kill was quickly growing, to say the least. So since my life completely relied on Javier's ability to drink my blood, I still put out my blood for him to collect once a month. When Milos and Iris had kept me locked inside the dungeon for 3 months, they had even made sure to draw my blood and mail it to Javier so that I didn't die. See, that was the thing about Milos. Even though he had his own plans for me, the last thing he actually wanted was for me to die. That would have gone against everything he had wanted. At least, at that point in time, he wanted me to stay alive. But now? Well, now I was pretty sure he probably wanted to kill me. Good afternoon, class, Caroline Wickburn began, snapping me out of my thoughts and right back to her classroom. And welcome to Deadly Lunar Magic. Something you should all be aware of is that this is one of the most important classes that each and every one of you will ever take during your time as a Crescent at Werewolf Academy. Deadly Lunar Magic is something that all werewolves are capable of, but you, my dear Crescents, are more naturally able to perform this type of magic than other werewolves are. This is because, unlike other werewolves, you all have darkness written in your DNA. Professor Wickburn moved across the classroom. Her eyes locked on mine and she smiled at me. Returning the smile, I breathed the slightest sigh of relief. She was still seeing Javier. I was pretty sure she didn't know that I was his blood mate. Otherwise, I highly doubted she would be smiling at me. But what's most important is for you to learn how to control your dark lunar magic. As you already know from your previous Crescent classes, you are naturally more prone to use your magic for evil. Your mind doesn't work the same way as a Descendant, a Marked, or a Lupin. You are more naturally inclined to think about ways you can harm other paranormal beings and humans. It's just a part of your personality. Something you might not already know yet is that you also tend to be less in control of your magic than other werewolves are. This is because you think more with your heart than you do with your head, and most of the time you don't even think at all. You see, the moon can also throw you a curveball. But there's another factor too that can complicate things even further. Even if you're in control of your dark magic, the full moon can make it nearly impossible for a Crescent to contain. Now, as many of you know, it is against the rules for you to use dark magic on the Werewolf Academy campus. But here's where things can get tricky at times. I'll let you in on a little secret because there's a chance that you might end up in a situation where you might find yourself getting into trouble for a spell you've casted using your dark magic on campus. And there is technically a way out of it. In order for you to actually get in trouble for using your dark lunar magic, someone needs to prove that it was premeditated. But it's not always easy to prove that dark magic that's been casted during a full moon was actually intentional, she explained. As werewolves, our powers are always amplified by the moon. Since your magic tends to be on the darker side to begin with, the moon only amplifies and sharpens that. Therefore, you very well may cast spells during a full moon that you may not even realize you are casting irrevocable spells that you might not be able to undo. Professor Wickburn glanced around the room for a long moment before her eyes finally settled on mine. If you aren't careful enough, you just might end up killing someone under a full moon without even realizing what you've done. I could have sworn there was a pointed look in her eyes which didn't move away from mine. I might have only been imagining it, but I didn't think I was. No, I was pretty sure she was trying to tell me to murder someone during the full moon so that I could get away with it. The only question was who? Which of the werewolves on my own personal hit list did Caroline Wickburn think I needed to get rid of? Chapter 4. After all of our classes had ended, I made a beeline off the campus. The last thing I wanted was to have an awkward run-in with Iris and Vince, and, truthfully, all I really wanted was to just be home with the Darkin. After the 3 months I had spent being held as prisoner in Milos's dungeon, the withdrawals that I felt from being away from my mates were more intense than ever before. Even though I had gotten to see each of them throughout the school day, I missed the others when I was with only one of them. I just wanted one-on-one time with them all at once. And knowing that I felt that way, knowing that I needed them so bad, made me feel weak. In fact, I felt weak a lot of the time. Here I was, the princess of the werewolves, the first natural-born werewolf to ever exist. The first girl alpha of an all-male pack who had ever existed. I was supposed to be this strong, completely badass werewolf. But the reality was that I wasn't. As strong as I supposedly was, I still hadn't even been able to rescue myself from Milos's dungeon. I hadn't been able to escape, not on my own anyway. Not without the guy who had rescued me. If it weren't for him, I probably would have still been locked in that dungeon, still trying to figure out a way to get out. Even though I hated him with every ounce of my being, the truth was that I loved him too, because when it came down to it, I owed him everything. He had saved me once before, and now he had saved me again. The only difference this time around? He was one of the 5 werewolves who owned a piece of my heart. Okay, we need a game plan, Aidan said as my mates and I sat around the living room later that night. None of us are comfortable with you being so close to Iris, Colton commented, running a hand through his longish blonde hair. Fortunately, one of us is either with you or not too far away from you. For most of the day, Reese said. But it just isn't enough. If something happens, I'll obviously let you guys know through Mindspeak. I told them. No, that's not enough. We need more of a system in place. We don't want you going anywhere alone. Ever, Theo told me. Fair enough, I replied with a shrug. It wouldn't have been the first time. One of my mates had followed me around to protect me, considering I was afraid of Iris and Milos, and I had no idea what their next move would be. I wasn't about to protest. The truth was that having one of my mates with me all the time was actually pretty comforting. Not that I would have told any of them that. I didn't want them to know how weak I was. Not after all of the time they had spent training my weakness out of me last year. We don't even want you hanging out with Maddie by yourself, Theo informed me. There's a party this weekend, I informed them. No, Theo said firmly. I shot him a look. I already promised Maddie I would go. Brandon's throwing his annual back-to-school party. It wouldn't be the same if I don't go. The risk of you running into Iris is just too big, since the party's not during school hours. There are technically no rules in place, Theo replied. Technically there are rules in place. We're not allowed to harm anyone or use dark magic on campus, I insisted. Besides, I can't live my life in a bubble just because Iris decided to show her face on campus this year. It still blew my mind that she had the audacity to come here even after she tried to kill me. The worst part about it was that she probably would have killed me if it weren't for him. I had survived her once. I wasn't about to nearly die because of her again, even if that meant not going to the party. Fine, I said with a sigh. I'll tell Maddie I can't go and break our tradition of going together. Actually, I have an idea, Colton said then. What if one of us just goes with you? Yeah, that seems like our safest bet, Reese agreed. Better yet, why don't you just bring all of us? Aidan asked. Okay, let's be real. I can't bring even one of my professors to a party for students, let alone all of you. It was like they had forgotten all of the lectures Headmaster Black had given me in the past about not broadcasting the relationships I had with them on campus. Not that I really cared to follow Headmaster Black's rules anymore, when he couldn't even do me a favor. Actually, you can bring us, Theo insisted. No one has to actually know. We're there. I glanced over at him with raised eyebrows. What exactly are you suggesting? That we use an invisibility spell to stay hidden from the other students but still be there so we can keep an eye on you. Well, that wasn't the worst idea he'd ever had. Okay, I agreed with a nod. Really? You'll let us spy on you? Aidan stared at me curiously from behind his honey brown eyes. Is it really spying on me if I'm letting you do it? I countered. Touché. I wasn't going to lie. I felt so much better about going to the party knowing that my mates would be there with me. Even though I wouldn't be able to see them, knowing that they were there would make me feel a hell of a lot safer. The next few days of class were a blur. Vince kept heading over to me. I knew he was trying to talk to me, but every time he did, I ducked into the girls' bathroom or headed into one of my mates' offices until the next bell rang. Just couldn't bring myself to talk to him about Iris, even though I hated not being able to tell him the truth. I had a really hard time paying attention in any of my classes, even though I tried to learn all I could, especially in Advanced Weaponry Lunar Magic 301 and Deadly Lunar Magic, but my mind just kept wandering to other places, like what Milos and Iris had planned. Speaking of Iris, I kept catching her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking, and honestly, creeped me the hell out. Sometimes her looks were full of hatred. Other times they were full of amusement. But all of the time, one thing was clear. Iris Frost really hated me. Well, the feeling was mutual. Towards the end of the week, I grabbed the hall pass and headed to the bathroom during one of our classes. Once I was finished, I flung the stall door open and found myself staring at Iris's back as she stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding against my chest. I couldn't believe this was happening. This was the closest I had been to Iris since classes had resumed for the year, and we were all alone. If she wanted to do something to hurt me, if she wanted to kill me, I was close enough for her to do just that. You can try to kill her first, my own voice whispered at the back of my mind. I needed to stop viewing myself as so weak. I had been trained by the Darkin, some of the most powerful werewolves in the world. I was the first biological werewolf. I was Princess Fallon. But I couldn't let myself forget the truth either, and that was that Iris Frost was far more powerful than me. Iris's eyes locked on mine through the mirror, and a sly grin hit her lips. Hey, Raven. I didn't respond. I couldn't respond. I couldn't even bring myself to move, let alone speak to her. Iris chuckled as she continued to wash her hands. When she was done, she grabbed a paper towel and then turned to face me. Cat got your tongue? The amusement swirled around in her eyes devilishly. When I didn't respond to her, she twisted her lips into a kissy face. Smooches, darling, she said, blowing a kiss in my direction. Anger flooded my veins, and my heart pounded against my chest as she walked past me. As I heard the sound of the restroom door closing behind her, I found myself completely consumed by a memory. It was a memory that I often tried to forget about, but one that was ingrained deep inside my mind. It was a memory that often haunted me, and there I was, getting lost inside it all over again. The days in the dungeon passed by slowly. Every day my wolf would take control and try to find a way out, but it was just no use. My magic wasn't strong enough inside this dungeon, and I could feel myself growing weaker by the day. I was growing tired from trying to get out without success. My mind was always looking for a way out, so my thoughts never turned off. The exhaustion of being away from my mates for so long was also setting in. Felt all of the withdrawals, all of the emotions that came with being away from them. I was terrified that I would never see them again. I just kept wondering if they even knew that I was missing or what they were feeling about. I kept trying to reach out to them through my thoughts, but it was just no use. I knew it was because Milos had spelled the dungeon, making it impossible for me to communicate with my mates through my thoughts. Still, I kept wondering if they missed me, if they were looking for me, how they hadn't found me yet. I also wondered if something may have happened to them. I hoped that nothing had. One day, I heard the sound of feet pounding their way down the stairs that led to the dungeon and the door being flung open. I was able to tell that the feet belonged to a male. It was Milos. Even though I had been here for what felt like an eternity now, I had still barely seen him. As his figure emerged from the darkness, appearing in front of me, I could see him smiling down at me. Raven. My sweet Raven. I let out an animalistic grunt, even though I was in my human form. Ah, you're pretty pissed off at me, aren't you, my love? Milos asked. I can understand why. No one wants to be kept in a dungeon. Then why are you doing it? I asked through gritted teeth. Why am I doing what? His voice was just dripping with amusement. It made me want to punch him in the face. You know what you're doing. I sighed. Why are you keeping me as your prisoner? I'm merely doing what's best for you right now, Raven. I know you might not see it that way, but the more you cooperate with me, the sooner you'll get to leave. Milos's black eyes locked on mine. How does that sound? Will you cooperate with me? I half thought about telling him that I would cooperate with him. The truth was that I would have done just about anything to get out of this dungeon, away from him and back to my mates. But judging from the stupid cocky grin that I could see through the dark, I knew that agreeing with him would have only meant giving him his way, and that was the absolute last thing I wanted. So I shook my head. Why the hell would I cooperate with the person holding me captive? Werewolf, Milos corrected. I loathe humans. You were human once yourself, I commented. That's irrelevant. Milos sighed. Well, since you aren't going to cooperate with me, it looks like I'm going to have no choice but to compel you. Compel me to do what? I asked him. You will do exactly as I say, Milos told me then, a look clouding his dark eyes as he stared into mine. Do you understand? I tried to fight against him, but it was just no use. He was stronger than me, more powerful. I couldn't control myself as I nodded my head. It was as if my head was moving entirely on its own. Iris, you may come in now, Milos called loudly. I heard the sound of the dungeon door opening, followed by the sound of heels clacking as Iris made her way downstairs. Great. I wasn't sure what Milos was about to compel me to do, but the absolute last thing I wanted was to even face my now ex-best friend. As far as I was concerned, she was just as much my enemy as Milos was. As Iris came into view, she smiled at me. "Hello, Raven." "Raven, you will remain in your cell," Milos said as he pulled a key out of his pocket and unlocked the door. Even though every part of me wanted to run right past him, I couldn't, of course. I was stuck there, my feet rooted to the ground, unable to move, despite how badly I wanted to. It was in that moment that I realized he had me under his spell, fully and completely. Whatever he was about to make me do, I would do. And that scared the ever-loving shit out of me. Iris stepped into the holding cell with me. I wanted to take a step back, but I still couldn't seem to move. "Move forward, Raven." At his command, my feet carried me entirely on their own. I wanted to be as far away from possible from her, but now we were standing close, far closer to her than I ever wanted to be again. "Now I want you to kiss Iris," Milos instructed. "What the fuck?" My heart pounded against my chest. Kissing Iris was the absolute last thing I wanted to do. It was just wrong on every level. First of all, I liked guys. And not just any guys, but my mates. They were the only ones who I wanted to kiss, period. But even if I had to kiss a girl, I didn't want to kiss Iris, my enemy. And yet, I found myself moving closer to her. I couldn't even seem to think about what I was doing as I pressed my lips to hers. Her lips were soft, sweet, but still they belonged to Iris. "Raven, I want you to kiss her like you mean it," Milos added. Even though I was screaming out inside my mind, my body did exactly as he told me to do. I deepened the kiss. And I hated every second of it. "That's enough," Milos finally said before turning away from us. As he walked across the dungeon towards the stairs, I broke the kiss. But I didn't move away from her. My body and mind felt sort of frozen and completely traumatized by what had just happened. Iris's lips lingered on mine for a long moment. When she finally pulled away from me, her eyes fluttered open, and she pressed a finger to my lips. "Wow," she commented as a grin slid across her face. "I can understand why all of the Darkin enjoy kissing you so much. You're a really good kisser." I just stared back at her, feeling completely sick to my stomach. What the actual fuck had just happened? Why had Milos compelled me to kiss her? Didn't even make sense. "You're probably wondering why you just kissed me, aren't you?" Iris asked. I couldn't speak. I just felt numb. The answer is simple, really. Iris's light eyes met mine. "I'm number 2. She turned around and walked out of my cell, then closing and locking it behind her. She didn't say another word or give any further explanation, but she didn't need to. I already understand exactly what she was saying. It all had to do with the triangle. I thought about the prophecy again for the millionth time since I had learned of it. The triangle would be formed when 3 alpha wolves, all born of 3 of the most powerful ancient werewolf packs or their first-generation descendants, kissed the first biologically born werewolf in the world. The 3 of these werewolves will become the most powerful alphas in the world. I had long known that Milos was the first part of the triangle. We knew he came from the Tigray pack, one of the most powerful ancient werewolf packs. He was also the most powerful werewolf, let alone alpha, in the world. If there was even the slightest bit of truth to this prophecy, it only made sense that he was one of the 3. So Milos was the first of the triangle to kiss me, and now Iris apparently was the second. The crazy part about all of it was that I hadn't known that she was an alpha to any pack, but it was clear that Iris had kept a number of secrets from me. The one thing I did know about her was that she had been around during ancient times, or else I wouldn't have seen that portrait of her in the castle I had grown up in on Nocturne Island. She wouldn't have acted so weird when I had told her about it either. Iris Frost had definitely been around for a long time. That must have been the main reason Milos and Iris had lured me here. And obviously the reason he had compelled me to kiss Iris. She was the second part of the triangle. I just wondered who the third part of the triangle could have been. During the weeks after Milos had compelled me to kiss Iris, things got crazier. Milos kept bringing in guys to kiss me, compelling me to do so the same way he had compelled me to kiss Iris. By the 4th guy they brought in for me to kiss something because painfully obvious, Milos and Iris didn't have a freaking clue who the third part of the triangle could have been. And that was the most relieving part about all of this. Because the moment they figured it out, everything, the entire world as we knew, it would change. I couldn't let myself forget about the second prophecy. Ever since I had learned about it, it had been at the forefront of my mind. It was something that I had never forgotten, something that I often found myself worrying about, so I was constantly reciting what I had read in my mind. The triangle's powers would be so strong that they would tip the balance of good and evil. The world as we know it would be forever changed. Fires would begin to erupt everywhere, wars would break out between all of the paranormal races, and over time the portal into the human world will go extinct. The only way to undo the triangle's devastation would be to end this alliance through death. The only one who could kill the alliance, however, is the first biologically born werewolf. I worried about this part of the prophecy for so many reasons. For starters, there was going to be a war that I wasn't prepared for, a war that I wanted no part of. And yet, the war involved me, because if it wasn't for me, then the triangle could have never been formed. Every paranormal being who died in this war would die because of me, because of the triangle that would be created because of me, and that was such a hard pill for me to swallow. It also scared me to know that portal between the human and paranormal worlds would no longer exist. How would I visit my uncle and my friends back in the human world? How would my friends visit their families if they got stuck in the paranormal realm? And again, this was something that would be no one's fault but mine. Because if I wasn't the first biologically born wolf, then the portal would remain in existence. I also feared that Milos would kill me once the triangle was formed. Because if I was the only one who could kill the triangle, then the smartest thing for them to do would be to eliminate me. Because if I couldn't kill them, then they could remain the most powerful alphas, their power strong enough to start wildfires, start wars, and shut off the connection to the human world. No pressure at all. I just hoped that they wouldn't be able to figure out who the third part of the triangle was. No, I hoped that the triangle would never be formed at all, and that I would somehow figure my way out of this dungeon before it was all too late. Chapter 5. Maddie came over to the darkened house to get ready for Brandon's party with me. I wasn't really in the mood to get dressed up with her, but she insisted that we do our hair and makeup together. Getting ready together before Brandon's back-to-school parties had been our tradition. I suppose that it was another way I wasn't giving Iris the upper hand. She couldn't ruin the tradition between me and my best friend. And to think that I had once worried that Iris felt left out as one of my best friends. Ha! As I ran a mascara wand over my eyelashes, Maddie pointed her chin at my wrist. What happened to your tattoo? I didn't even have to look down at my tattoo to know exactly what she was talking about. The flame that had once been behind the darkened paw print was gone. The flame disappeared when I stopped being alpha, I explained. I wasn't going to lie. The truth was that I sort of missed it, and not only because of what it represented. Being their alpha had made me feel so powerful, but it was so much more than just that. I had been able to hear all of their thoughts so much more clearly when I was their alpha. Now I could communicate with them the same way I had before, as long as I wasn't wearing the necklace that blocked them from hearing my thoughts. But our connection just wasn't quite as strong. Then again, I wore my necklace to block them from hearing my thoughts more often than I didn't. Because that necklace blocked him from hearing my thoughts to our new alpha. I tried to shift my thoughts away from him, but that was difficult. My mind often wandered back to him, even when I didn't want it to. So I have exciting news, Maddie said, glancing at me in the mirror. Oh, what is it? Brandon and I have been talking, and we decided we're going to get married. Over winter break. Married? You're only 18, I insisted. I'll be 19 by the time we get married, she explained. Besides, we're mates. It's not like we're going to get married young and get divorced. We already know we're more than in love with each other, and we've known each other our entire lives, so it seems pointless to wait. She paused for a moment. And okay, we might be rushing it a little bit, but I promise you, there's good reason for that. Let's hear it. The only way we can share a dorm room on campus is if we're married, Maddie explained. Headmaster Black told me today. Oh, well, that makes sense. Truthfully, it still made me nervous that Maddie's roommate at Werewolf Academy was Sarah, the girl who had been my lady's maid when I was Princess Fallon during the ancient times. Except she was going by the name Lydia, which had been the name of my mother, the queen of the werewolves. It still seemed odd to me that Sarah had chosen to use that Name of all the names in the baby book to choose from. I still hadn't figured out what Sarah's intentions were or why she was at Werewolf Academy, but I knew that it must have had something to do with me. So, I wanted to ask you if you'll be my maid of honor, Maddie said. We're going to have the wedding back in the human world so both of our families can be there. Of course I'll be your maid of honor. As long as the portal between the paranormal realm and the human world didn't end up getting closed off by then. I wasn't about to tell her that, but I knew that it was a very real possibility. Now that the triangle had been formed, the portal could end up getting closed off at any time. And that scared the shit out of me. The party was already raging when we got there. Not that it surprised me. Brandon was known for throwing the best parties. That was why everyone seemed to trust him to throw them. Even though I tried to get into the music and just enjoy the latest Taylor Swift song that was thumping all around us, I was just paranoid. What if Milos did decide to make an appearance? What would happen then? Would he try to kill me? These were thoughts that always plagued my mind, but they were even stronger tonight. I knew it was because he'd shown up a year ago, so I was on edge. Because of that. Everything is going to be okay. Your mates are here with you, I reminded myself. Knowing that made me feel better, but only slightly. I want a beer, how about you? Maddie asked. I thought about not drinking, but I knew that it might help calm my nerves. I want a drink, I agreed. As we headed over to the table that served as a bar, Maddie grabbed a beer and I grabbed a wine cooler. Then we got lost in the crowd and began dancing. I realized then how much I hated Milos even more than I thought I did. Because, when it came down to it, I couldn't even have fun. Not when I was too busy worrying about bumping into Milos or Iris. Just enjoy tonight, I tried to tell myself. But I knew that was a whole lot easier said than done. For some reason, the alcohol hit harder than it usually did. I was dancing in the crowd to the new Billie Eilish song when Maddie grabbed my hand. Come on. I see Brandon. I let her guide me over to him. We were about halfway there when I spotted them out of the corner of my eyes. Vince and Iris. They were headed our way. Oh, shit. Without even giving a second thought to what I was doing, I ran. I knew how weak it made me seem. I knew how weak it actually was. But I didn't care. I didn't want to deal with them right now. Or ever for that matter. Not until I figured out what to do about Iris. Right now all I could think to do was run. I had begun to realize that was what I did. I ran from all of my problems rather than dealing with them head on. It was becoming a problem, one that I knew I would need to deal with eventually. After I killed Milos Santorini and Iris and every other enemy who had made their way onto my hit list. I hadn't figured out how exactly to do that just yet. I also wasn't sure how long I had to do it. The only thing I did know was that it had to be done. Was the only way. I had just rounded the corner and was headed back to the darkened house when I nearly collided with a tall girl. Her jet black hair was shorter now, it fell just below her elbows, but there would have been no mistaking her from even a mile away. Jessica Davis, Milos Santorini's daughter. Ah, hell no, I muttered under my breath. Hello to you too, she replied with a laugh. I just stared her down. Jessica was the alpha of the she-wolves. She had gone to great lengths in the past to try to get me to join her pack. She wasn't my favorite werewolf, to say the least. How was your summer, Raven? I rolled my eyes at her. Like you suddenly care how my summer was? Please. Normally I didn't feel this comfortable about talking to her, but knowing that my mates were at my side had given me the boost of confidence that I really needed to deal with her. Actually, I do care. There was a genuine look in her dark eyes. I'm sure you've probably heard how I spent my summer. I folded my arms across my chest and narrowed my eyes at her. I knew that Jessica wasn't all that close with Milos, but her question was too specific. There was no way she was just curious about how my summer had gone. She had to have known that I'd spent the majority of it locked in her psychotic father's dungeon. I have no idea how you spent your summer, or else I wouldn't have asked. Guess it wasn't so good. I rolled my eyes at her. Would you just relax, Raven? Jessica asked with an eye roll. No matter what. You might think I'm not going to hurt you. The reason I'm here is because I want to help you. I stared back at her face. I wasn't sure what it was, but something about her just seemed so genuine. Even though every part of me wanted to not trust her. For some reason I believed she was telling the truth. Help me with what? I finally asked, my voice slicing through the silence that hung in the air between us. I want to help you kill my dad. Chapter 6. 10 minutes later, Jessica Davis was sitting in the darkened living room. All of my mates had made themselves visible for this discussion. I know what happened. I know that my dad is one of the triangle. That was one of his biggest goals in life. My mom heard all about it during their relationship. He always planned to use the power he would gain through the triangle for evil. He wants to become the most dangerous dark magic practicing werewolf in the world. I guess now, he technically is the most powerful dark magic practicing werewolf. We need to stop him, Jessica explained, gripping her coffee mug so hard that her knuckles were turning a ghostly shade of white. My dad wants to get rid of the vampires, the witches, and the fairies. His plan is for the werewolves to be the only paranormal race that's left on this planet. He also wants to get rid of good werewolves and save only those who practice dark magic. Your dad is the very definition of a big bad wolf. Aidan made a lame attempt at a joke. I glared at him. Now is not the time for humor. Then I turned back to Jessica. You told me in the past that you would lead me to Milos, but you didn't want to be the one to kill him because you didn't want to hurt your mom, I reminded her. Now you're telling me you want to help me kill him. I would kill my father in a heartbeat if I could, Jessica replied. My mom does still love him and I don't want to hurt her. But I'm afraid that my dad is going to end up killing her in the end anyway. My mom doesn't practice dark magic. That's why their marriage didn't last. They're so different from one another. She paused. I mean, I would kill him in a heartbeat if I could, but we all know that I can't do that. It has to be you. I nodded my understanding. Like the prophecy said, I was the only one who could actually kill the members of the triangle. I was the only one who could end the destruction that all of them would cause. Why do you suddenly want to help us now? What changed things? I asked. The triangle, she explained. Someone has to help you stop my dad, and honestly, as far as I'm concerned, we're all choosing our sides in this war. I'm not going to side with him. I choose to side with you, with all of you. She glanced around at my mates. If you'll let me, that is. She would be useful to have around, Aidan said. And inside sources too. Milos's real location. Well, here's the thing. I don't actually know where my dad is right now, Jessica explained. I just know where he could be. I paused for a long moment. If we agree to let you help us, will you ever expect anything in return? Will you try to make me join the she-wolves? No, she shook her head. I'm choosing to help you because I want to help you. I want to get rid of my dad. You'll never owe me a thing. If you go against your word, I will hunt you down and kill you, Theo informed her. Then so be it. I'm telling the truth. She rose to her feet then. You can. Let me know your answer on Monday, Raven. Just know that I truly want to be on your side. No, we don't have to wait until Monday, I told her. I want your help. She smiled at me. I'm so glad. I made a decision then. We start looking for him tomorrow. You can sleep in the guest bedroom. Set your alarm for 7 a.m. Her eyes widened a little, and first I thought she was going to protest. But instead she just nodded. Sounds like a plan to me. When my alarm went off the next morning at 6:45 a.m., Theo groaned. I know we want to find Milos, but do we really have to start looking for him this early? I'm testing Jessica, I told him through MindSpeak. If she's willing to get up at 7 a.m. to help us find him, then I believe she's actually being genuine. But if not, is the time really a good test of her loyalty? Maybe she's just not a morning person. Or maybe she is a morning person, and that's even more of a reason this shouldn't be used to test her. If she's not a morning person, and I suspect she's not, then this will be uncomfortable. And that's the point. This whole process should be uncomfortable for her. It's not easy to kill one's father. If you say so. Theo shrugged as he kissed me. I kissed him back. Then I added, besides, the sooner we can find Milos and kill him, the better. What if she's really able to lead us to him? I guess we're about to find out, he replied as he untangled himself from me and pulled himself out of bed. I climbed out of bed too and changed into a white tank top and gray yoga pants. As we headed downstairs, I was surprised to find that Jessica was already sitting at the kitchen table. Do you want cream or sugar in your coffee? Aidan was asking her as we entered the room. No, I prefer my coffee black, just like my heart, Jessica replied. Her gaze shifted to me and Theo as we entered the room. Good morning, lovelies. Good morning. You guys are up early, I found myself saying. Yeah, I'm so not a morning person, so I decided to just stay up and watch some TV. I figured I would be more awake than if I went to sleep for just a few hours. I was knees deep in a Golden Girls marathon when my TV woke Aidan up, and he decided to keep me company. How nice of him. I shot Aidan dagger eyes as I made my way over to the Keurig. It was hard for me to hide my jealousy, but I couldn't help it. Jessica went to Aidan's office hours. I had questioned Aidan about it before, and he told me that Jessica was having a hard time in his class, so he was giving her some one-on-one tutoring. He told me that I had nothing to be worried about, but even so, I had always secretly wondered if she wanted him. More importantly, I had wondered if Aidan secretly wanted her too, even though ancients could only be attracted to other ancients, being Milos's daughter meant that Jessica was half ancient. And while I knew firsthand that being attracted to a half-ancient wasn't as intense as being attracted to a full-blooded ancient, I knew that it was possible. I had found myself attracted to Javier at one point in time, and even though my connection with Javier had been nothing like the connections I had with the Darkin, I knew it was possible. Anyway, the point was that hearing Jessica and Aidan had stayed up alone last night together just drudged up all of those old feelings, and I didn't like it one bit. Good morning, everyone, Colton said as he strolled into the kitchen, interrupting the awkward silence that had filled the room. Good morning, Jessica said, a sugary sweetness to her tone. I found myself rolling my eyes at her as the Keurig began to make a whirring sound. Do you really think this arrangement is going to work out? Theo asked me. It has to work out. She might be our key to figuring out where Milos is hiding. As of right now, we don't have even the slightest hint. My mates had tried to find Milos after I had escaped, but it had been no use. Milos hadn't been at his house on Nocturne Island. We hadn't known where he was hiding out. But if we let Jessica work with us on this, I'm afraid that you're going to end up mauling her to death. You must be struggling so hard right now not to shift into a werewolf, Theo responded. Actually, I had become really good at controlling my inner wolf. Took as much to anger me these days. That was one of the only good things that had come from my 3-month stint in the dungeon. I now had the patience and tolerance of a saint. It's just obvious that you don't like or trust her, especially around your mates, Theo went on. This jealousy might make this situation really hard for you to handle in the long term. Right now I need to give this a try. Just leave it alone, okay? I shot a glance in Theo's direction. He nodded from where he was sitting at the table across from Jessica. Okay, so let's get started, I said as I carried my coffee back to the table. Just as Reese entered the room yawning groggily, I sat down at the head of the table diagonally from Jessica. The first challenge is going to be actually locating your father. Well, the first place I would check is the house on Nocturne Island, she said. We already have. That's where he held me captive all summer, I explained. He's not there anymore. Okay, well, I have both good news and bad news. She paused. Let's start with the bad news. My dad owns 53 homes throughout the entire world. Holy shit. I had figured that Milos had other residences aside from the house on Nocturne Island, but 53? How the hell were we going to be able to find him? And the good news? Colton pressed. I know where all of them are, Jessica asked with a shrug. 53 homes, Theo said, shaking his head. Even if we decided to check out all of them, he could easily move on to the next before we find him. Unless we break up into groups, Jessica suggested. We can start with the United States. You and Raven can go check out his houses in the northeastern U.S. Colton and Reese can take on the south, and Aidan and I will head to the west coast. I found myself glaring at her yet again. Of course she would have wanted to team up with Aidan. I knew I probably sounded like a jealous schoolgirl, but he was my mate. I may have had 5 mates, but until I ended up choosing one, he was mine. And even if I didn't end up choosing Aidan in the end, I hope he didn't end up choosing her. Of all the werewolves in the world, did he have to be with Milos's daughter? I actually often wondered what would happen to my mates who I didn't choose in the end. Would they be with other people? If Professor Lee was able to figure out a way to break the curse that prevented ancients from being attracted to Anyone besides ancients, then anyone was fair game. All of them could go on to have normal, happy relationships without me. I wasn't going to lie. That last part made me pretty freaking sad. This plan sounds great in theory, but logistically it doesn't work, Theo said, pulling me back out of my thoughts. Why? It seems like a pretty great idea to me, Jessica said. Because we're contracted to teach and you and Raven have school. We can't just up and leave everything right now to go check out 53 houses with no guarantee that your father will be at any of them. She folded her arms over her chest. I thought you guys want to kill my dad. It's the only thing I want, I said with a nod. That was a lie, of course. I also wanted her to leave my mate alone, but saying that out loud only would have caused drama, and I had enough of that. Lately, sometimes you have to make sacrifices to get what you want. Skipping school or work just might be one of them. I don't think splitting into groups is a good idea, I said. What if something happens? We should really all stick together. Mostly because I wasn't about to let Aidan and her travel the West Coast together. No, that was not happening under my watch. Not without a fight. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, finally shook her head and then rose to her feet. As she began to walk across the room, I asked, "Where are you going?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Back to my dorm room. Call me when you guys are serious about actually finding and killing my dad." A few moments later, I heard the front door open and then close. I turned to my mates. Well, that was a waste of our time. Maybe she would have stayed if there had been less tension in the room. Colton said quietly, "What are you saying?" I knew he must have been referring to my jealousy. "Oh, come on, Raven. You were acting like a jealous schoolgirl," Theo said, shooting me a side-eye glance. "That's because I was a jealous schoolgirl." I sighed. "Was it really that obvious?" "Very, very obvious," Reese said with a nod. "Great. So, I messed up our one connection to possibly kill Milos?" I asked. "Maybe," Colton said. "Great. I'm glad you all blame me." Rising to my feet, I headed to my bedroom. Closing the door behind me, I climbed under the covers and turned to face the window. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," I called, even though I didn't really feel like talking to any of them. Truthfully, I was feeling sort of sorry for myself. If fate hadn't been so cruel that it had to mate me with not just one but 5 guys, things would be so much less complicated. I wouldn't have to get jealous about a guy who wasn't even technically mine. I would get to just be a normal wolf with a normal mate. But here I was, jealous about a guy who I wasn't even entirely sure I would choose in the end. "Raven, can we talk?" Aidan's voice asked. I didn't turn to look at him. "I guess." He closed my bedroom door and then climbed into my bed. Dropping his arm around my waist, he said, "Is there something you want to talk about?" I just shrugged. "What's all this jealousy about?" "It's stupid," I replied with an eye roll. "And that's the thing. I know. It's stupid, but that doesn't make me feel any less jealous." "Well, it is stupid," Aidan agreed with a nod, brushing my hair out of my eyes. "But it's not because of how you're acting." I shifted in my bed to face him. "It's not." "No," he shook his head. "You're just acting like a werewolf normally would act about her mate. Jealousy is all par for the course." "Well, then why is it stupid?" I questioned. "Because you should know that there's nothing on my end when it comes to Jessica." "How would I know that?" I knew I just sounded like a brat at this point, but I needed some sort of reassurance from him. I figured that it must have just been the werewolf in me. Because everything I have, every single part of me, my heart, my body, my mind, it all belongs to you, Raven. You're my whole life, my whole world. His honey brown eyes pierced straight through me. "So Jessica Davis can feel however the hell she wants to feel about me, but it doesn't mean a goddamn thing because you are my everything. I love you, Raven." I knew he meant every word. "I love you too." He brought his mouth down on mine then. His kiss completely stole my breath away, but I just kissed him deeper. His lips moved their way down my neck, sending a wave of shivers down my spine. Before I even knew what was happening, he had pulled my dress off. Reaching behind my back, he unhooked my bra, allowing it to fall to the side, revealing my breasts. His mouth fell to one of my nipples, and he sucked it slowly as his hand drifted downwards. He slipped his fingers beneath the lacy material of the skimpy thong I was wearing. As he touched me, my hitched in my throat and I arched my back. "I want you inside of me," I whispered. "Are you sure?" His honey brown eyes stared into mine for my approval. Last year, I had told him I wanted to wait until I made a decision. But now, everything had changed. Now all I wanted was to feel him inside of me. I nodded with certainty. He covered my mouth with his lips again, as I reached for his zipper and pulled his pants off. I could feel his bulge through his boxers. He slid out of them and then kissed me again. He tilted forward then, the weight of his body pinning me against the mattress. As we breathed heavily into each other's mouths, my body was already trembling with my hunger for him as he pressed his tip against me but didn't enter me. It was a slow torture and enough to drive me mad. I moaned against his mouth. Please fuck me. That was all it took. He slowly pushed himself inside of me, satisfying my craving. As he filled me, a deep primitive groan escaped his lips. Fuck yes, baby. His pace quickened and I could feel myself tightening at the core. His breath quickened, and his lips came crashing down on mine as we completely came undone together. As I called his name out loudly, I knew damn well that my other mates could hear us, but I didn't care, because right now it was just Aidan and me.